Welcome team, so happy today to bring a very good friend of mine, Ronald Griffiths, to the show. Ronald, I've introduced you as a very good friend, but I should introduce you for the reason you're here. You're a very good coach. In fact, I believe you'll be the next Indigenous head coach after the great Artie Beetson. There's only been one Indigenous coach in the NRL, and I honestly believe you'll be the next one head coaching in the NRL. And I say that because I've watched you coach, mate. I've worked with you, I've coached with you. We just recently, off the back of your Indigenous Allstars camp, where you coached that men's team to a very tight victory against the Maori All-Stars. It was one of the best weeks I've ever had, mate. One of the best camps, the way you ran that camp. It'll go down as one of my best memories. So I'll introduce you as a coach as well as a friend. So thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks for having me. Humbling words, mate. Certainly that's, an aspiration of mine to be a head coach at some stage when I think I'm ready and when the right opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, well, but I wouldn't just say that. I'm not just saying that to hype up the show.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that, mate. The way you ran that camp, the way you loved your players, I noticed that you have that trait of that manager, that kind of, how to put it, you could sit over the top of, I know you're saying when you're ready, but you could sit over the top of you are a coach, whether it's male or female. I should have said you're the female head coach at the Newcastle team that won their first premiership.
Yeah.
So you're a head coach, doesn't matter if you're coaching females or males.
Yeah.
I watched what you did in that camp. Those players loved you, mate. Well, they would die for you. And where did that trait come from? What influences in your life have you had in the coaching? Can we go back maybe and just take us through your journey?
Yeah, we can. I'll probably digress and go back to that first statement. And I think that, the magnitude of coaching an NRL squad, I think it's not that I'm not ready, but I think there's so much more to go into it, and I've got a lot of development. And I think the other thing is, putting the right people around you and building a crew over time, and at an organisation that is ready, for what I've got to offer. I think that's what I mean. I've got no doubt if I stepped into a role, it was the right place and we had all those things in place, I'd be okay. But, to find that at this point in time is probably, probably not right there. So that's probably, just wanted to digress a little bit. And when you talk about, sitting over the top, that style, I suppose that's how I was brought up. So if I think about, in 1978, the first Aboriginal or Newcastle All Blacks played in the local second division competition, and I reckon back then there was 7 or 8, there were 7 or 8 Aboriginal families that lived in Newcastle, and they all came together every weekend. We'd go to the football. My dad was a coach, a player, and a player coach over time. And I reckon everything we did then together was inclusive, and we all did it together. And that was sort of a learned trait or a learned behaviour for me. So I think that, part of my style is to try and get everyone together on the same page, working towards a common goal. And they were lessons that I learned as a kid, being in the sheds from, when I was first born that year to, for the next 20 years as I watched my dad coach. And I think it's not just a coaching thing. I reckon it's a collective community thing for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Yeah.
You mentioned your dad, so obviously I wouldn't mind sticking there. Yeah, great influence on your life. Not only your life, but also your coaching life. What was he like as a coach? What was his characteristics that you loved? Now, you being a professional coach, looking back at him, what made him so good?
I think, they talk about the good coaches now, like that have been in the game for a long time, and they talk about the investment in the people. And I think that's the lesson that I learned from a very young age. That's what Dad did. He was invested in his players. Whether that was having them live at home, helping them find work, whatever was required to make their life comfortable and make them better people. I think that was the biggest lesson for me. And I learned those lessons without even understanding that I was actually learning them. There were things along the way where he'd say different things to me around, if you get the stuff away from footy right, everything will be okay on the field. And develop the person and the player will follow. You know, there are a lot of different lessons like that, but I reckon subliminally I was getting those messages just watching what he did by having people in our home, organising a rugby league coaching clinic for 100 Aboriginal kids from across New South Wales, and then venturing into Queensland and getting kids from out there, you know, disadvantaged Aboriginal kids, and bringing them to one area, and then putting great mentors around them, you know, guys that were playing ARL at the time, Jeff Hardy, Ricky Walford, Dennis Kinchler. You know, there were a myriad of players that he brought in. Further to that, he brought in influential figures in the game, you know, guys that had probably, like Keith Holman, guys that had played at the highest level. Paul Broughton, you know, who was a big figure and was a great figure in the game. Was involved in setting up the Titans. You know, there's probably back in that era there wasn't anyone that of note that didn't come to our camp with those kids. So, you know, his responsibility was to build our people up, those young kids, bring them from the bush, give them an opportunity, and show them that there's a different life, and then, you know, provide a pathway for those kids to go on and represent and play at the highest level, or take lessons back to their community and be better, you know, be better citizens, and you know, grow out of that camp for that week.
Mate, that's so good. And you mentioned some names there that, you know, Paul Broughton, for example, well respected in the coaching game and the coach education game, and they're a real giver, you know, and it sounds like your dad's a real giver, and I know you're a real giver and carer. But you mentioned the word learn a lot. Just in conversation, you use the word learn a lot, where you are a lifelong learner. You didn't even know you were learning when you were this big.
Yeah.
But then that's progressed. I mean, we first met in a representative camp I was working in, and I'll tell the listeners that you knocked on my door one night, and I just connected with you straight away. We have a similar upbringing. How my father, I lived and breathed coaching my whole life. You didn't know that at the time. I didn't know your bit at the time. We just had this connection around. You always wanted to learn, and that's how I've always been. I've just learned of great people, great coaches, and we had a bowl of red. I think you were on a beer, I was on a red, and we talked footy and connected. That was like 15 years ago, mate.
Yeah, 15 years ago.
And since then, you've learned and learned and learned. You've worked and worked and worked. You've been assistant coach at an NRL club. Then you decided to start coaching the women's game at the Newcastle Knights and won the competition in your first year. We've had Hannah Southwell on the show, who talks very highly of you and the culture that you created. But you've always been a lifelong learner.
Yeah, I think I listened to the podcast with Wayne, and I reckon it was a moment there for me where it was similar for you. You were in a room with Wayne or a camp with Wayne. If you didn't take the opportunity to learn off someone who's got so much skin in the game or so much knowledge, I think you're doing yourself an injustice. And I remember, I remember sort of watching from afar. Obviously, you'd been at Parramatta and done different things, and I just thought to myself, well, it's an opportunity to go and learn. So I knocked on your door, and the relationship, you know, it has been there since then. And I was coaching local league then in the Newcastle competition. That conversation was still, there were some of my best learnings out of it, that first conversation we had. And I remember talking about being economical in everything we do, you know, in particular, like, hey, if you're using your warm-up, making sure you're using parts of your game in that, you know, what are you going to, you work on your kick pressure, you work on your retreat speed, different things like that. So, and those lessons held me in great stead, because when you're working at a local league level, like there's you, and maybe, you know, your reserve grade coach, you use him as an assistant. So the lessons I got there about economy and making sure that everything was relevant to the game are lessons that I still carry now. So it was great from that perspective, and, you know, they hold me in good stead, those lessons. But I think, you know, learning is, you know, each day I try and do something little. You know, it might only be read a chapter of a book or watch a doco, you know, different things. And it might be just go and ask questions. You know, I've recently just might call people and go, hey, what do you reckon about this idea? Or just ask them their thoughts on different ideas or scenarios or why they do that. You know, a big thing for me I've been asking lately is, are we in the business of performance or people? And, you know, you get some different responses, because I feel like I'm in the people business, and me as a coach, I may go too far that way sometimes. And I reckon talking to different people, you know, they give me different advice or different ideas on, you know, it's got to be a mix of both, but don't really revert from your philosophy and what you believe in. So I think, learning can take place in many shapes and forms. And I think it's, if you want to be at the top of your game or you want to progress and develop, it's something you've got to continue to do. And so much so that when I finished school, year 12, I didn't go to university. My parents encouraged me to, but I was never a great studier, and it didn't really interest me. But further on down the track, after I'd been, coaching for a while, and I thought, well, what's the evolution of my coaching? I had the level 3 coaching certificate, or high performance certificate, but there was nothing else, and there's really not much out there for rugby league coaches. So I went and studied, or via distance ed, at the Queensland University certificate in coaching. So, I mean, that's how keen I was to continue and keep learning.
Well, mate, first of all, some absolute gold in there. As far as the gold is, you're a listener to the podcast. I mentioned the Wayne Bennett episode. That's possibly my most listened to episode.
Yeah.
Wayne wisdom and his experience is priceless, and I'm forever grateful for that episode because it's there forever. And the other one is, you mentioned that experience with me was like the one I had with Wayne. So I wouldn't call myself Wayne Bennett, but it's humbling that I did have an impact on your life at the time. I didn't know that until you just told me like that. So my experience was, which you heard on the Wayne Bennett episode, was very similar. I was rooming next to him in the Kiwi camp of the 2008 World Cup, and I thought, this guy's won, at that stage, 6 premierships. Every grand final he goes to, he wins. So I thought, I better go knock on his door. And then that's how that relationship started, being a great friend and a great mentor ever since then. In 2008, you mentioned people or performance. Well, if you think of someone like Wayne, it's both.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned something about being yourself. If you can develop your own coaching philosophy and then stay authentic to that, because that's you, and develop other areas, but stay you, which you do, is definitely on the right track. And that's Wayne.
Yeah.
He's very authentic to him. He is very caring of his people, and he does perform. I've had roles where my job title's been head of performance, but I see performance as physical, mental, technical, tactical, cohesion, culture, the morale of the place, the environment. There are so many things that go into actually performing. And one of the crucial pieces of that puzzle is the people side, which you're a genius at. That's why I started this episode with, you need to be a head coach. You're probably thinking you want to go down the path of being an assistant, but you've already done that.
Yeah.
You need to be a head coach, because that's the skill of the Wayne Bennetts of the world.
Well, I think when you talk about being an assistant coach, I probably don't necessarily, if the opportunity arose, I wouldn't say no, but I don't necessarily want to be an assistant coach, because I think I've got a philosophy and a set of values or a style on that and not that I wouldn't be able to support a head coach, because I would do it I would do it with, I'd do it with integrity and make sure whatever his message was, that's the overriding, the key thing that we're really pushing. Yeah. The head coach is the boss, and I would support them no matter what. But I think when you're when you've got your own style and you're really confident and comfortable in what you're doing, and you've got a philosophy that you really, really believe in, I think that's, for me personally, that's why I want to be a head coach. Yeah. Because I do have that. But I reckon, there's some good stuff there around the performance side of things, particularly some conversations we've had lately. I think that a lot of the time, and there is a place for sports science in our game, but I reckon a lot of it is feel and understanding that what we're doing on the field, particularly in terms of training, has got to be relevant to what we're going to be doing that weekend when we play. Yeah. Because I feel like people that study at university, and I have total respect for what they do. Yeah. Sometimes I reckon they forgo the feel and the understanding of what the player needs in terms of footy relevance. It's got to be relevant to the game, and also how the player's feeling at that point in time. It's not just based on numbers. So I reckon it's the stuff that we've spoken around about an overarching approach, or, encompassing everything. I think that's what's a little bit missed at this point in time.
Yeah, that's missed across a lot of sports. I just had a very interesting chat with a very experienced NBA coach recently, and getting the art versus with the science and the balance right. But the beauty is the successful coaches like you actually just said it, you respect that. When you respect that, then you all seem to work together.
Yeah.
There's some coaches that don't respect it and brush it, and then there's a clash. Or there's the opposite. There's the sciencey side that don't respect the art side of the coach, so it's a clash. The best sports scientists I've ever worked with, Tom Lovell, Jed McGrath, Aaron Coots, there's a few really good ones, Anita Sorotic, some really, really good ones. They respect the art of the coaching as well. And then when they have a coach that respects their bit, then you can all work together. And that's where the magic happens. You said the word respect there. I want to go there because it's my favourite word in sport.
Mm-hmm.
If you respect the game pays you back. If you respect that sports science team, they pay you back. You respect your players, they respect you back. Like, it's just life, isn't it? Something that's really big in you, in your family, how you live, but also I want to go there as a value or a law of the Indigenous people.
Yeah.
So could we teach people the Aboriginal laws, LORES? Dean Winters taught me that, LORES. Because I believe any team, all the teams that have their values on the walls, and some teams are just words on a wall and they don't live it. The ones that win, they live it. But the laws I've learned of the Aboriginal people, if every team had those on the wall and they lived it, they win.
Yeah.
Can you take me through that?
Well, I think if you touch on particularly one in particular, like respect, I mean, that's how we were brought up. From as soon as you're born, really, it's about respecting everyone. We respect Mother Earth, we respect our siblings, our parents, those in the wider community. I'll give you an example, and it's a relevant recent one. The young kid that said something to Latrell, that game against the Panthers. You'd see Nico come out in the papers a week later and said, I'd love to get him into our camp and understand what we do in camp and our culture in camp and how we live it, how we develop it, so he can see, what happens, and so he can learn a little bit more about our culture, and then other people in the media might have said, hey, that's the furthest thing, from my mind. A non-Aboriginal person said that kid shouldn't be doing that. You're rewarding him, but you're actually not. For us, it's not about that. We respect that. He mightn't have been brought up. He's got a different upbringing to us, and he didn't show respect that day. But our job is to respect him and actually show him that there's a different way. That's the big thing for us is, people might do the wrong thing, but at the end of the day, we don't know what sort of a life they're living or how they've been brought up or what happens. So for us, it's about, hey, let's get everyone on the same page here and work towards a common goal, and let's be inclusive. And I think the big thing with that is because a lot of our elders or ancestors probably weren't included, and that's the furthest thing from our mind. So when you talk about respect, I think that's a sign of it there, what Nico did, and that'd be a sign for our organisation or our team to bring in a heap of non-Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids and show them that respect to learn our culture and understand what it's about. There are other different things that go with our law, but in particular, like when you talk about respect, it's such a carries so much weight with it with our people.
Yeah. So what I learned, I know we're going off topic of the coaching topic, but it does relate to listeners about living your values. So what I learned about the Aboriginal laws, and I'm talking hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, the reason they're the oldest living culture in the world, what I understand, living in a harsh country it was hard to survive.
Yeah.
Those days, hard to survive. The way they survived was they had laws within their tribe. And unfortunately, some of this was taken away from them, and then that's led to, there's some communities now that unfortunately maybe through sport we can get them back living those laws. But the laws were, and they were represented by an animal. I don't know if, so there was respect, responsibility, discipline, and there was justice as well. And that was called a binder.
Yeah.
So the way I look at that is, can you imagine a team, if you're coaching a team that were disciplined on and off the field, respect the game, respect the opposition, respect the staff, respect each other, however you see respect. They were responsible, and if they weren't disciplined, the justice version in the game is you get penalised,
Yeah.
But in the tribal life, the way I've learned it so far, and you might help me more, was everyone had a responsibility in that tribe or that team for it to function. Everyone had a responsibility. They all lived with respect, in particular respecting their elders and their families. And like you said, the earth, and they were all very disciplined. The justice part became interesting. I asked Dean Witters in an episode, the justice was, if you didn't do those, you got a spear in the leg.
Yeah.
Or maybe you were shamed or from the tribe.
Yeah.
Do you feel what I feel about how we can impact, if we could help through sport, some younger generations that may come back in how they live? Because it was taken away from them. We can't hide from the fact.
Yeah.
Responsibility was taken away from Indigenous people, even they didn't even have rights to their own kids.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother episode. But it was taken away from them. Do you believe through sport we can bring this back?
Well, I think so. I think through sport, education, like if I look at the North Coast at the moment, there's the first ever bilingual school up there. Yeah, so they actually came over and performed in Rotorua when we were over there. That night we went out for dinner. Yeah, so that's the first ever bilingual school in New South Wales, I should say. So I think, we can get it back through education and sport in particular. For instance, like if I think back to when I was a 12-year-old and my dad used to run that camp, that's what it was about, using sport as a conduit to be able to improve the lives or provide opportunities for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I think sport's the best, one of the best conduits for it. You can open doors for them. You can reinstill the values or the law that we live by for instance, getting them in camp like we did, and we had our cultural people in there to teach the young men those lessons, because some of them are displaced from their culture. So it's a perfect opportunity for culture to be a conduit for them to learn more about the law and the value system, and then live their life like that.
You just said some of them are displaced from their culture. So some of them that don't even know either the history of, and I found that was so powerful in that camp. You brought me into that camp as a non-Indigenous person. Why did you do that?
Well, I think it was an opportunity for you. We'd obviously connected years ago, but I reckon it was, after we'd been working at Newcastle, and, I thought it was an opportunity for you to come in and learn about our culture and then take that into your, future endeavours, whether that be with New South Wales or whatever role you're in. I thought it was a great chance for you to understand, particularly when you're coaching. You spoke to me about your example with Fui when you had him at Parramatta and you learn his culture or you learn his language. But then I thought to myself, well, it was an opportunity for you to learn more about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So I know your podcast is to help people learn. So there's an opportunity for you to learn and then present that to your listeners. But also when your coaching endeavours take you wherever they are, it's a chance for you to work closely, because you've got more of an understanding of our culture and our players and what it means to them and how to get the best out of them when you're in Origin camp.
Well, it did that, mate.
Yeah.
It did that. And I appreciate it. I'm grateful for that. Is there any lessons you've learned that we could share to listeners right now in your coaching journey? Is there? Because I think back in mine, and I had great people, just grab me under their wing and say, you're going all the way, son. Like, you are going all the way in this game. And people like, obviously I grew up with it, I was surrounded with it, but people like Brian Smith or people like Wayne or people that gave me encouragement. I'm doing that to you now. I'm saying, Ronald, you are going all the way, mate.
Yeah.
But I've got a feeling it hasn't been so easy. Like,
Yeah.
there's a tough journey out there, and there's people listening now that they're on a bit of a tough journey. And I hope everyone's got that person in their life that says, mate, aim high, you're going all the way. But is there anything happened in this last 20 years that hasn't been so easy?
I reckon there's a lot of things that haven't been easy. Like, nothing's been presented to me. I've had to work hard and scrap for everything I've got. You know, for me personally, like, I got an opportunity at the West Tigers, but it was an opportunity. It wasn't as an assistant coach, but it wasn't an opportunity that was presented to me. I actually had to. I was involved with the New South Wales under 16s Indigenous team, and Steve Hall, who's since passed, pay my respects to his family. Steve is a great person, and you know, he gave me opportunity at a rep level to coach that team. And I was fortunate enough, there was a family involved, or they were a sponsor of that team. Kari, they were called, but Paul Ralph was the CEO at the time, and he just said, if you ever need an opportunity or a leg up, let me know, and if I can help you, I will. Yeah, so Paul was actually he sponsored that coaching clinic as well. And then after that, I just caught up with Paul and had a coffee and a bit of a yarn. And I just said, you know, what would be the opportunity? Because Madge was actually a presenter. And late one afternoon, I grabbed Paul and said, what do you reckon about having a chat with Madge about the possibility of volunteering my time at the West Tigers? And he said, yeah, that won't be an issue. Like, we'll go and have a coffee with him. And we did. And Madge was very welcoming and just said, yeah, that won't be an issue. So for me, I was coaching probably three teams that year. I was coaching my son's team. I was coaching an Aboriginal knockout team. And I was also coaching first grade at Curry. So I was managing 3 jobs. And previously I had managed probably 4 jobs throughout a season, but that year was 3 jobs, and I was travelling down to the West Tigers, you know, a day a week, and it went sort of a day a fortnight depending on what was happening, just volunteering my time and just for an opportunity to learn. Then after that 12 months, Madge said, well, there might be an opportunity there if we can, you know, talk to Paul about, you know, some sort of, or Paul actually spoke to me. Madge said there might be an opportunity, and then Paul grabbed me and said, what do you reckon? I said, yeah, that sounds good. But then, like, the Tigers weren't willing to stump up the money to actually pay my wage. So it was actually like Paul put his hand in his own pocket to say, well, we'll pay half your wage, you know, to create an opportunity for you. And that was the only way that I got my opportunity was, you know, through my relationship with them, the connection I'd made probably 8 years earlier as a coach of that New South Wales under 16s team. And that relationship I'd built over time, that organisation was willing to use some of their money to be able to provide me with an opportunity. So,
wow.
Yeah, it wasn't ever presented to me, or it was something that I worked at for years. Like, it was a long journey, and relationships I'd built, you know, it finally came to fruition, and the sacrifice, the time away from the family. Yeah. And at that point in time, there was no other Aboriginal assistant coaches in the NRL. Yeah.
Well, that's another topic, but I'm going to do my very best to make sure that changes and help. Mate, I'm starting right now. You are going to be a great coach, a head coach, but there's so much history and work that's gone into it that if anyone ever says you're an overnight success, I'll punch them in the face, because it's not.
No.
Like, it's a 20-year project already. So when you came in and you coached the Newcastle Knights women as possibly your first proper professional job, and you took them straight to a premiership, that's not overnight success story. That's 20 years of work.
Yeah.
And even you just mentioned you were the only Indigenous assistant coach in the NRL. And like I said, there's only been one ever Indigenous head coach in the NRL, and that's the great Artie Beetson.
Yeah.
So we're going to change that, brother. And there's other coaches out there too. There's quite a lot.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot of good coaches, and I think I can refer back to that coaching clinic that Dad used to run. His motto was "Opportunity leads to success," and I think that's the thing. Our people haven't been given the opportunity, you know, to get success. You know, and I reckon if clubs are brave and come up with some sort of initiative or program, I reckon that you know, they'll see a lot of great Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander coaches.
So when you are on the $1 million a year, which comes with that type of role, this guy Paul, who chipped in to get to your first gig, is he on 10%? I bet you he rings you. I bet you this guy Paul, hey, Ronald, remember that time? Yeah. Oh, that, mate, I just love hearing those stories because there's a lot of listeners out there that are on a similar path, similar journey. I reckon a good topic for us, for listeners, is the difference between coaching men and coaching women.
Yeah.
Because I believe you're a coach, you're a coach. Doesn't matter if you're coaching women or men, you're a coach. But everyone's different, every group's different, every age is different. What did you find the difference coaching women and men?
Well, I think if I look at the professional men, obviously I came out of the Tigers environment, seen what was happening with the Newcastle Knights when I arrived there. And if you look at the men, sometimes there might be an assumed level of knowledge where, they're professional athletes, they do it day in, day out. And I think that at sometimes we might overlook that, they still need, skill development or need personal development, personal growth plans, different things like that. But they are more advanced than the female athletes in terms of they grew up playing football. So the little nuances of the game and understanding why they're doing what they're doing, that's the difference, I reckon. Getting our female athletes to understand that. But in terms of coaching and trying to get the best out of your athlete, I don't think there's any difference personally. They've obviously all got their own things going on in life, whether it's health, well-being, raising kids, or for the females working outside of their, their rugby league career. But for me personally, I still think my philosophy is the way you get the best out of a player is it doesn't change. I think that's where I go back to the, high performance or people business. And, for me, I lean towards the people business, and I without the high performance, it won't work. You need to have a good combination of both. But I think, if you get the people right, everything else will sort of flow. So I don't think there's a great deal of difference other than, if you're trying to get the best out of them, other than the real skill development, understanding the nuances of the game and, how to pull teams apart because they haven't grown up playing rugby league like the men have.
Yeah, I think you answered that really well. I just was curious on the women's space. I'll even share my experience. You asked me to come in on the first night, the very first night, and talk about culture and when I say culture, I mean values, words on the wall, but how we're going to live those. What do they look like? What does it look like on field, off field? And honestly, I found that group of women that you had, right, so engaging, so... Like, you could walk into a group of men and present stuff, and sometimes they don't speak. You had people in that team contributing and engaging to that conversation from the word go.
Yeah.
You had... And then you mentioned some things. Like, there's some things women are going through that are different to men. I mean, you had one player that just had a baby.
Yeah.
So she was juggling work, training, getting home at 10 o'clock at night from training, got a baby at home, got a great partner who understands the game and played the game. But, there's different issues going on in women's life.
Yeah.
But I found them amazing, mate. I found the leaders in that team, like, from the first... You know how we talk about the importance of first impressions? So I know you wanted us to give a first impression that night. But I got some first impressions from them that just blew me away.
Yeah.
I found the women so grateful for people giving their time, and they were grateful to learn. They were grateful for the opportunity. The leadership on some of your players, like Millie Boyle. Like, I know as we're recording this, the contract situation is going to go crazy, and there'll be CEOs that hate me for saying this. You pay her whatever you want. Pay her whatever she's asking. As a leader, you can't buy that. I don't know if that affects you at the office, but as a leader, you can't. The way she led other women in her team and encouraged other people and built everyone up. But then you had other great leaders the same. Hannah Southwell's the same. And then next thing you know, her sister's coming through, Jessie Southwell, who'll be a leader for, at least by position, her position, she has to lead whether you like it or not. But I found you encouraged leadership. I found that was one of your key things, was to encourage leaders to lead. And sometimes you used to step back and let it happen. That's obviously something you really value. That's priceless, right? I mean, there's salary caps that are going to restrict it, but it's priceless if you can get the right leader.
Yeah, and I think creating the right environment for the leader, I think that's a key, having the right people in the team, the right people around them, and then just putting some different tools in place to make sure that they can live their role or do their role to the best of their ability. I think that's a big thing. But just to digress a little bit, we had training yesterday with our Harvey Norman team, which I coach, and I had Beric Barnes come along and we're talking after the session. He goes, "You got a great group there?" And I said, "Yeah, they're a great group." And he goes, "Mate, there's just something about coaching our female athletes and how much they listen." He said, "You can do something special with that." Yeah, it was like his first impression to first session he'd been to. And they were a lot of our young girls. Like, we had a couple of NRLW players, but the rest of them were all girls, young ladies looking for an opportunity in NRLW. And he just walked away so impressed. He just goes, "Yeah, I've been involved with other female teams, and just the intent that with which they listen and then go and do it." He said, "You can do something special with that." So it's a great point.
Well, it is. Well, it's also a compliment to you because you've created that environment and you encourage that out of them. But yeah, I just found the women very grateful. You even had like Tamika Upton, who's obviously been brought up very well about the respect side of things, and to even they'd actually come and say thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I found they were grateful for every opportunity. So yeah, you're in a great space there. I'm not sure how long you'll last in the women's space because the men will be coming to pinch you, but yeah, well done on that, and well done on those girls have then gone and inspired other girls. There's another generation, including my own daughter. So very grateful for what they do. Mate, I might finish off with I want to know, like, because I always think how can I help the listeners? I want to know, is there anything we can help them with now? Like, is there a favourite book? You mentioned you read a chapter. Is there a favourite coaching book, or is there a favourite person you follow? I love that you follow the podcast. Or is there something that you do in your own life, even in your routine maybe, that can help a listener right now? A book. Give me a book.
I reckon there's some good points there in terms of there's things that I need to be better at. Like, so when we talk about like daily habits and different things like that, and I find that I'm at my best when I get up early. I'll do some breathing. I'll write down what I'm grateful for. I might have a stretch and might just do a bit of meditation. And I reckon when I stick at that process, I feel like I'm at the top of I feel really good, and it just sets the whole day up. So I reckon there's some nuggets there for the listeners in terms of, find a process that works for you and stick to it.
Is that something you picked up that I try to encourage you with the journaling we would do, or is that something you picked up somewhere else? Or?
I reckon it's a bit of both. So I reckon there was some particularly, but when I was at the Tigers, assistant coach came in, Nathan Kalis.
Yeah.
And he just gave me a journal, and I'd never done any journaling before. I was never big on it. Because I hadn't really sort of spoken about it or learned anything about it, or just it hadn't sparked an interest. And he gave me a journal, and the other assistant coach gave him one. It was just a habit I got into, and then I turned up at Newcastle, and then you had those journals, and I thought how good this would be this for our players. And I sort of started a bit of a process where I thought, well, this is my morning routine, and I feel like for me it just revitalizes, it refreshes, it resets, and just get your whole day going good. But in terms of reading, I'm not a great reader. I try hard, but it's a struggle. But I make sure that I try and chip away each night. But the most recent one I've been reading is Belonging. It's called Belonging. It's about the Māori people. So it was an opportune time to read it as we're heading over to Rotorua. But I reckon there's some great lessons in that. And the one I just finished prior to that was the Eddie Jones leadership one. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that. Like, I just, It was really good, and it took me back, reading the Eddie one, to how I first started coaching, I reckon, where everything was based on, hard work and intent. You didn't need to be the most skillful player, but if you were willing to be fit enough and, or be as fit as you can, and really listen to what we needed to do to get a win, or what we needed to do to be better people, or achieve the end result, stick to the process. It sort of took me back to that, the simplicity of the game we play, and making sure that we train with intent, but, above all else, we've got good people working towards a common goal.
That's awesome. Well, there you go. 2 books, Belonging and the Eddie Jones on Leadership. We'll throw a little ad out there, free plug. Eddie Jones, I'm waiting to get you on this show. So you mentioned Nathan Kalis. I took Nathan to see Eddie recently.
Yeah.
And it's funny you said you picked that up in the book, but one of the parts of the conversation that was trying to help Nathan in his coaching was basically sharing a lesson. If he could go back 20 years, maybe he would focus more on intent. The intent was the word that he used, intent in everything, intent in every drill, intent in why we're doing it, how the intensity we want, what's required. He used the word intent a lot. And it's funny that you just said you picked that up in the book. So that's the next person I'm going to take you to meet, Eddie Jones.
I think when you talk about the intent, like if you've got the intent to run hard or run fast, and you've got the intent to support, you've got the intent to kick chase, you've got the intent to kick pressure, transition back and tackle hard, and you've got the intent to communicate. Like, I just think everything revolves around that. There's got to be a real want and desire. And when you look at our game, it's like it's played in a coliseum where the crowd are around you cheering. It's 1v1 really. It's 13v13, but it's men on. I think that's the thing. If you're willing to play with more intent than your opposition, and I think you've got to train like that. And being a local league coach, there's no one guiding you or giving you lessons really on how to train or what to train or what level of intensity to train at. So you go all out. You're a young coach and you're trying to learn, and you think that's the best way. And then you get to a higher level where you rely on a lot of other people. But I reckon, over time, those lessons I learned, listening to Eddie, the lessons I learned when I was coaching by myself about intent, working hard, and the lessons I learned with you, from you about making sure everything we did was relevant to the game, they'll keep you in good stead no matter what level you're at.
Awesome, mate. Hey, thanks for coming on this.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Thanks.
Anytime.
Some of the best learning you will ever do will be traveling. Give yourself space, time to creatively think, to learn, to meet people, or take a vacation with your family. Give yourself that time. And there's no better person or people or company to help you than the people at Tripadeal. Their experienced agents will look after you from start to finish. They will plan your flights, your accommodation, your car, your excursions, whatever you need. If you want to plan a trip of a lifetime, Tripadeal is the place to go. tripadeal.com.au